Alright, back for more SMT in a brand new room no less, no longer filming in my box of a bedroom, but instead a larger box of a bedroom. Nothing too unfamiliar as well if you've watched mine and Jude's Cuphead streams we've been doing lately, but at the very least you won't be seeing my bed in the corner anymore like an amateur. Just off to the side now. So this time we're talking about a game from the Devil Summoner sub-series of SMT, my first one too, Soul Hackers, released in Japan for the Sega Saturn in 1997 and 1 year later for the PlayStation, but we in the West wouldn't get it until 2013, 16 years later with the remastered 3DS version. Where the mainline Shin Megami Tensei titles usually love to take place in a post-apocalyptic setting surrounding Tokyo, the Devil Summoner games like to be modern-day detective stories, but including the newly released Soul Hackers 2, there's only about 5 games in this series, not counting spin-offs, and the first one's still a Japan exclusive. Maybe ATLUS just weren't as interested in them as SMT or Persona? I don't know. People outside of Japan didn't even get to experience the Devil Summoner series until 2006 and 2009 with the 2 Raito Kuzunoha games on PS2, and those were action games instead of turn-based RPGs, so not really giving us the best idea on what Devil Summoner is all about. It's kind of a shame really, but hopefully the release of Soul Hackers 2 will fix that somewhat. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Soul Hackers nope, sorry, I can't keep calling it that, absolute mouthful. No wonder they shortened it by the second game. Anyway, Soul Hackers is technically a sequel to the original Devil Summoner and opts for a more cyberpunk vibe to it. Blade Runner was a big hit at this point, thus every futuristic looking city needed to have the same aesthetics, and the internet was slowly becoming more commonplace by the late 90s, as well as the massive dangers it held if used incorrectly and or illegally. Not like nowadays where the internet's a total safe haven, right? This is 90s cyberpunk though, so everything needed to be different shades of blue, green, and orange. Characters had silly codenames that were based on their simple traits with some corny dialogue here and there. Technology is both the best thing and worst thing ever, and there's the big bad corporation that wants to use that technology to take over the world through mind control, slavery, or just to fill their greedy pockets, sometimes all of the above. A few overall changes were made for the English version of Soul Hackers on 3DS, such as cleaner visuals and updated voice acting from the usual Mega 10 staples like Laura Bailey, Liam O'Brien, Cassandra Lee Morris, Aaron Fitzgerald, Yuri Lowenthal, and so on. But it's ultimately the same experience you would likely get with the Saturn original. But before we begin going through the plot of Soul Hackers, I just want to quickly show this off while we're on the subject of Mega 10 because this is very special to me. Throughout the number of streams I've been doing since I've started, I've had one lady by the name of Barbara Dupperton frequently coming back and providing friendly comments, which was pretty great already and I appreciate the viewership. But she recently went above and beyond and actually got an autograph signed personally to me by voice actress Jeremy Lee, aka my #1 Persona girl Makoto Nijima. As a bonus, Barbara even got me this cool Queen poster and made a cute little doodle referencing me saying balls all the time in streams whenever I get frustrated. That marks this, my first ever fan donation, and it has touched me so much that you would do that, Barbara, so thank you 1,000 times, and I hope my future content will continue to entertain you. The rest of you should follow her example. Kidding, of course, only do it if you want to, and I will forever cherish it. Now then, on to the show. Welcome to Amami City, a place that's always connected online in some way or another, including needing ID to buy even the simplest stuff. Can't wait for that to be an inevitability in the future. Oh yeah, not exactly sure what year it's supposed to take place in, but I guess that was done on purpose so that you can just say anywhere in the future at any given point and leave it at that, which I'm fine with. A beta for a new virtual world called Paradigm X has just been announced with only a limited number of applicants able to test it. Then we take on the viewpoint of this game's protagonist, who's got like 3 different names and aliases to be used later, so take your pick because I can't be bothered with this nonsense anymore. And there's his best friend Atomi, who are both members of a hacker group known as the Spookies. Sure, I can take that name seriously. The protagonist, who I lacked more imagination for a name than with the Demi-Fiend, so just stuck with Dingus as his codename, as well as Hitomi, replaced the names of 2 of Paradigm X's beta testers so that they can play it. However, a voice who calls himself Keenap seems to be talking to us upon doing so, recognizing a strong soul within our heroes and warning them of oncoming danger. Back at home, we're introduced to the protagonist's family and ready ourselves for Paradigm X, but we suddenly receive an email from the leader of the Spookies asking for them to meet up. In a nearby garage, their leader comes in with the Spookies trailer. Wait, why do they have their logo on the side like that? Wouldn't they want to keep their little hacking project a secret instead of looking like the Mystery Machine? Whatever. This guy is codenamed Spooky anyway. I guess he wasn't feeling very creative the day they came up with aliases. But no joke, his real name is actually Masahiro Sakurai, so if you're sick of Goku not being in Smash Smash Brothers? Talk to this guy. Spooky doesn't seem to know who or what Kidnap is, but right now is more focused on showing a bizarre type of gun he bought that doubles as a PC. We then explore Paradigm X for a bit, which honestly doesn't seem that impressive even for 1997 with how little there is to do. But when trying to escape, Kidnap shows up again as a different animal to invite us on what's called a vision quest. Basically, we get put in the shoes of a devil summoner and experience what they went through before they died. Getting all Quantum Leap up in here. For this first one, we take control of a man named Arabe, who storms into a building belonging to a company known as Algonsoft, which holds a batch of people from an evil organization of other devil summoners called the Phantom Society. Inside, Arabe's looking to steal a computer program, but as well as members of the Phantom Society being there, demons are roaming everywhere who want to kill him. When Arabe reaches the computer room, he locates the program, which seems to be called Nemissa, but the file is too big to be put into his PC gun, now referred to as a comp. So he deletes all of his assisting demons to make room. However, one of the Phantom Society members, Finnegan, finds Arabe and has his demons chase after him. While running into a dead end, Arabe thinks to lock his comp so that the Phantom Society don't get their hands on Nemissa, before getting shot dead by Finnegan. Back in the real world, the protagonist inputs the same code Arabe set up, which unleashes Nemissa from her shackles, but she uses Hitomi's body as a vessel to carry her. Nemissa turns out to be a demon who was trapped in the comp for a long time and loves a dangerous life while carrying a cocky attitude. But Hitomi is still able to chime in whenever she can, so we have to keep watching these two fight over the same body throughout the course of the game. Right after this happens, we're then introduced to a couple more members of the Spookies, Six and Lunch. Yep, this is a 90s game alright. Six is the gun enthusiast of the group while Lunch mods hardware, and they claim he's always having lunch as well, hence the name, but we never actually see that happen. Spooky finds himself surrounded by demons at the Algonsoft building that Arabe was originally at, and when we get deeper inside, we witness Johnny Cage having a midlife crisis and mentioning he's with the Phantom Society, before he summons his own demons to try and kill us, though we end up defeating him pretty easily. Before making his escape, the rocker drops a note with some sort of code on it, which Lunch is able to decipher back at base. The code allows the Spookies to access something called the Summoner Net that's basically one big email server for the Phantom Society, and their latest post not only talks about harvesting souls for some evil scheme, but they also seem to be tied to a strange disease spreading around Amami City. This is where we additionally get introduced to the youngest member of the Spookies, Yuichi, and he, after being shown how to fuse demons with your comp, there's a new email on the Summoner Net from the rocker who says he'll be at the Astro Museum, giving us an opportunity to learn more about the Phantom Society. We see him there as he tries summoning more of his own demons to attack our heroes, but one of them actually turns on him, calling himself Mewis, and possesses the rocker to claim as his new body. We defeat him in a boss battle, and Mewis tries to take over Hitomi's body and, to an extension, Nemissa, but all he really did was transport them inside Paradigm X, where Nemissa changes into her famous black clothes. Kidnap shows up once again as a different animal to drag us to another vision quest, this time experiencing what happened to a man named Judah, another devil summoner from India working for the Phantom Society who was tasked to kill a demon in their base. This guy's probably my favorite of the three summoners you see in these quests, not only because right away he's rather charming and full of charisma, but he also uses a saxophone as a comp, which is so ridiculous it's immediately awesome.
Yo, boss! You sure got an epic looking comp. Does a snake pop out when you play it?
As Judah investigates further in, he runs into a woman called Rei Reiho, a member of the Kuzunoha clan, the same one Raito and the protagonist of the first Devil Summoner were a part of, and also rivals of the Phantom Society. They fight for a bit, but Rei stops partway through to say to Judah that he should use his powers for good instead of assisting the Phantom Society, which gets into his head a little as he ponders the consequences of leaving the society. After a while, Judah encounters the demon he's supposed to destroy, who constantly shouts the name Manitou, and we're only shown a fraction of this demon's power since his body still seems incomplete. However, upon beating him, his soul seems to be able to hack inside the nearby computer and blow the place up, killing Judah instantly before he could figure out his true feelings. Shame he had to go too, I would have liked to have him as a party member. The Phantom Society's next meetup is at the Amami City airport where Finnegan's leading the operation, so we head there as well. Inside, we step into the same place Judah died, and we see Finnegan easily killing the very demon that ended his life. But rather than stop us now, Finnegan seems to be one of those villains that sends more of his lackeys to do the dirty work for him until we get to the point where we're as strong as he is. After his demons are taken care of, we're then approached by a member of the Kuzunoha gang called Sukuroku, who's looking for Rei, the same lady Judah ran into, though we don't have much of an idea of where she is for the time being. Saying our farewells for now, things get even stranger when our sister Tomoko Tomoko is in a zombie-like state from playing Paradigm X, which Hitomi believes is a sign that Kinep's taken her to a vision quest, since that's apparently what we look like from her perspective the first time it happened. Tomoko seems to be trapped inside Paradigm X's art museum thanks to this guy called the Juggler, who will allow us to reach her if we find 3 chess pieces in 3 different paintings, since while we can see Tomoko in the distance, we can't quite reach her because the area loops over itself. It takes a bit of time to do, but we eventually get all the pieces and kill the Juggler in another boss battle as an added bonus, allowing us to go and save Tomoko. We find her with some sort of dolphin angel thing who Namisa figures out had taken Tomoko's soul into Paradigm X and won't give it back without a fight. But in due time, we defeat the angel dolphin inside a painting from a virtual reality art museum, a sentence I never thought I would say in the many years I've done this channel. These games are weird. For some reason back at home, the mother bans Tomoko from playing Paradigm X so she can study more and is no longer throwing tantrums like she always does, even though we'd never seen that before and seems like she studies perhaps a bit too hard. I already don't like the mother, she's way too pushy and her standards appear far too high. Right after we step outside though, Muis finds us for a surprise boss battle, saying that Namisa is a threat to her master and must be destroyed, but temporarily runs away after we beat him once more. Despite him getting away again, however, he does at least drop a metal part, which Six recognizes and says belongs to the Leon auto plant. So we wander around there for a while before we catch up to Muis and beat him yet again. He tries to escape one more time inside the monitors, but thankfully because Namisa's a computer program as well as a demon, she can enter inside as well and drag the protagonist too. Unfortunately, Muis used the last of his strength to enter this cyberspace, leaving Namisa without any questions answered about who she is, other than mentioning the demon Manitou like what happened with Judah earlier. When we head out of cyberspace, Ray lets us know to meet with someone named Madame Ginkgo, who knows a lot about the Phantom Society and could help them to their next lead. She doesn't really tell us much we don't already know though, other than the Phantom Society is stretched across the entire world and are looking to gain control, which if they're already using demons to get whatever they want, how much more control could they possibly get? They're practically running the show here as is, so there's somehow more power they can obtain? Whatever, 90s bad guy goals. Though it's also amazing how the destruction of this worldwide evil organization is entrusted to a small group of hackers, where only 2 of them can actually fight. Classic RPG tropes. There's an emergency, however, when we get another email on the Summoner Net, this time addressed to the Spookies now that the Phantom Society know they're listening in. Finnegan wants to meet them at the Amami float, to which Yuichi already saw the email and wanted to take him on himself, since he was tired of Six talking down to him all the time. Yeah, I kinda forgot to mention that. Six absolutely loathes Yuichi due to his incompetence that we never see. I'm sensing a pattern here. But when we meet him, he doesn't seem all that bad. He's maybe a little annoying, but he's eager enough to help out, and when he screws up, he doesn't do it on purpose. I think Six just acts unreasonable to Yuichi from the little time we do see of him, and this never gets elaborated at all, so it's just a bit mean-spirited for the sake of it. The protagonist and Namisa head deep into the Amami float anyway and run into Finnegan, who wants to challenge us 1v1 without Namisa as backup, but you can choose to still have her if you want to. I don't think anything really changes other than making the battle easier or harder and some minor dialogue differences, but if I'm wrong, do let me know. Yuichi's all safe and sound now, which is good despite looking a bit down, but not helping is Six going full asshole mode here as he completely rips into Yuichi, wondering what's even the point of saving him, what does he bring to the table, which I'll admit is a legit question. Still though, I get that he's worried about Yuichi putting the whole team at risk, but there was no need for Six to be as harsh as he is here. Yuichi's already feeling bad and just wanted to help, so telling him he's useless and the Spookies are better off without him is completely uncalled for. That's not to say Yuichi's entirely innocent, however, because he does act a bit like a child at a couple points by giving a half-ass apology and moping around, saying he'll leave the Spookies after their leader tries to talk calmly to him about his actions, all ending with a rather uncaring goodbye. Like, I know you're upset about what's going on, dude, but come on, grow a pair. The other members of Spookies do at least try to calm Six down and tell him to back off, but he's too filled with anger to think straight and runs off in a huff. Back at HQ, we find out that the Phantom Society have deleted our ID card, no longer allowing us access to most places around the city or purchase items. Yeah, it sort of acts like both a pass and a credit card. If you don't have one, then you really can't do anything. Even the stores you usually frequent will straight up refuse to serve you now. Spooky and Lunch will try and figure something out about that, but for now we should check up on Six, where by going to his house, we catch him playing Paradigm X and stuck in a trance similar to what happened to Tomoko earlier in the game. Lunch comes to the conclusion that all of these occurrences may be to do with the rumored disease going around, if you can even remember that far back. But the good news is that something can be done about our ID. One of the shops who normally sells chips for our comp just so happened to have a fake ID from the last time they hacked the government's office, kindly giving it to us to have full access to the city again. Well, that was easy. I'm not sure why the story demanded we lose our ID in the first place, honestly. Six appears to be trapped in the VR haunted mansion of Paradigm X, and we have to go through more mazes and puzzles to reach the end, gradually seeing more memories of him and his sister as they played together a lot. But there was one day where while doing so, Six accidentally pushed his sister down the stairs and killed her instantly. Through some Kingdom Hearts style bullshit, the memories in Six's heart have also created a demon that takes on the form of his sister, trying to emotionally manipulate him into staying with her. She calls forth more demons to assist her, but we defeat them all before anything drastic happens, trapping the sister back in Six's heart, with Six vowing to remember her more fondly, returning him to normal in the real world. Lunch afterwards digs up some hospital records about the disease and how it seems to be secluded to a mommy city and nowhere else just yet, so big plans are afoot for the Phantom Society and this disease. Right after that, another member of the society shows up for one more surprise boss battle, but defeating her is only a small victory as she placed a bomb on the Spookies trailer beforehand, though everyone manages to escape just fine before it explodes. Thankfully, there just so happens to be another spot Spooky considered using as a separate HQ, so again, not sure why the story even needed the first one to blow up, other than to show the Phantom Society are really meaning business. Because this game always seems to be moving, we've got yet another incident with a loved one, this time the protagonist's father, who's now joined a riot at the city's mall, only the rioters appear to be suffering from the same disease we've been investigating, which has additionally been turning people crazy. At some point during our travels, we not only save the father in the end, but we also come across a room in the mall that's holding patients of the disease in cryogenic chambers, right as Sukeroku shows up again and is also investigating the matter, saying we should turn our attention to something called the crypto chip inside of Mommy City's computers. Lunch actually swapped out a prototype of the crypto chip with the one in the Spooky's PC earlier, when his father confronted the group and asked about it. But Lunch wasn't willing to tell him anything since he's helped the Phantom Society before by selling them the factory he works at, and has held a grudge against him since. Lunch then takes apart the crypto chip and a flash of light comes out of it, with only Namisa and the returning Yuichi seeing some sort of pink insect. Unfortunately, this isn't quite enough to go on, so we now have to break into Algon Microelectronics where the chips are made. There we eventually see that the orbs in the middle of the chips have some sort of unknown power. Lunch's father shows up again too, explaining that he's also looking to find out the truth and even had to cooperate with the Phantom Society, otherwise they would kill his wife and Lunch. With Lunch now being more cooperative and understanding, he asks his father where we can learn more about the crypto chip, to which he points everyone to a data room for them to hack and get some info. As you might have guessed, it turns out the glowing orb, called the Spore, was designed to suck out the souls of their users, leaving them in the same state we saw with Tomoko and Six as well as the crazy rioters in the mall, with the bug that Namisa and Yuichi saw earlier being the carrier. A crypto chip is planned to be put inside of every household, and with so many people accessing the internet, a whole lot of souls are bound to be taken. We quickly handle the manager of the factory, who's yet another demon and also somehow knows Namisa and Manitou, but we again can't get any answers before he dies. Once that's done, the Spookies decide to hack into the airwaves to broadcast the secrets about the crypto chip, but that ends up backfiring on them when the Phantom Society were already aware of their plans and have now made them wanted net terrorists. Suddenly, they also get an email from the president of Algonsoft Kodokura, thanking Spooky for luring the other members out, indicating he's double-crossed them, which explains why Spooky wasn't in the TV report as well. He claims that while he does work for Algonsoft, he was only doing so to gather intel from the inside, but Lunch, Six, and Yuichi have already decided to leave Spooky out in the rain before anything happens, with us, the players, either deciding to do the same or stay with him to get further clarity. This decision doesn't really affect anything unless you're on New Game Plus, and it determines the fate of Spooky, which I'll go over in a bit. Right out of the blue, Kidnap shows up as a whole other animal again, inviting us to the third and last vision quest following another devil summoner called Naomi, who's hired by the Phantom Society to kill only one of two extremely powerful demons to make room for their main system. The choice is ultimately up to the player, but something the game doesn't tell you is that this also affects the final boss's attack strategy for later. Defeating Tiamat makes it more magic focused, while killing Apsu makes it act more physically. I went with Tiamat and just sorta hoped for the best that I could handle the magic-centric final boss. Naomi's really goddamn powerful too, with some amazing abilities, kinda making me wonder how much stronger Tiamat is compared to the last boss, and how Naomi still ends up dying from a poisonous gas and dragged to her death if she's such a good devil summoner. Of course, narrating everything too, since this game's not exactly visually heavy. Spooky then tries to upload a virus onto Paradigm X, since that's how everyone's souls are carried to their destinations, but Kadokura stops it before it finishes, although their call gets cut short by something. Everyone decides to charge through the Algonsoft main building to see what's happening, and eventually we run into Finnegan again, who for once is requesting help from us to stop a demon shifting the main building into the virtual world, and we can choose to cooperate with him or not. I figured I couldn't trust him given past events, so I ended up having one last encounter further into the dungeon, before I finally killed him off for good. If you do decide to cooperate with Finnegan, he'll still die by the time you reach the boss, so don't worry about the story changing too much. We then beat the demon that's been causing problems for Algonsoft, but this is where Hitomi becomes more tired and starts losing energy, which they think to ask Spooky about back at base. Who we find instead is a brainwashed Yuichi, where a returning Ray explains has been under the Phantom Society's control since he got captured, acting as a messenger to tell us that Spooky 6 and Lunch have been taken to the Amami Monolith, and that because the mist has been in Hitomi's body for so long, Hitomi's soul is fading away and could be lost forever if they don't get separated soon. As we go through the monolith, we rescue Lunch and 6, but while exploring, we also come across Kadokura, who seems to be having a slight mental breakdown, disappointed in what Paradigm X has become, putting all of the blame on Nishi, the country's vice minister and executive of the Phantom Society, as well as the person who gave Judah and Naomi those dangerous tasks in the Vision Quest. Kadokura advises us to locate Nishi on the upper floor to stop him. We meet him there as he tells us that the souls are being harvested for his master, Manitou, but turns into his true demonic form, Azazel, before he gives too much away. It's a tough battle, but we emerge victorious and finally put an end to the Phantom Society's plans, though the game's still not over yet because we reunite with Spooky at the rooftop while 6 and Lunch blow up the antenna that transfers souls. However, Spooky's now possessed by a demon and we have to break him free. Just as that's accomplished, for some reason this causes Spooky to be weak and suddenly die. I guess having his body taken over must have completely drained his life in a similar fashion to Namisa and Hitomi, but then if you play this part on New Game Plus and chose to stay with Spooky after he was exposed as an Algon employee, he'll still live since you take him to HQ in time to get treated, so why don't they just do that on your first playthrough? Not only that, but Hitomi's now completely lost all control of her body and has been left to Namisa. Kadokura comes back displeased that the antenna's gone because he only wanted Nishi and the demon controlling Spooky out of the picture, manipulating the party to do so with his sob story. Keenat then appears one final time in his true form to explain that he was the one who sealed Manitou long ago and also unlocks Namisa's memories. Fun fact, the idea behind Keenat was to represent how American films portray Native Americans and the way they love to keep in touch with their spirit, which makes more sense when you find out that his Japanese name is actually Redman. As Namisa awakens, she tells us that she and some of the other demons we fought are pieces of Manitou that got split apart by Keenat to make him less powerful, forming their own consciousness. Lunch's dad then gives us another tip that Kadokura the spores and some kind of monster lie underground below his factory, and after going through one final dungeon we notice that Manitou's now become a tree of spores, with Kadokura sucking up more souls, turning himself into a strong demon. Defeating him only draws in Manitou and his real form, however, now more powerful than before, and it takes a long ass time to beat him. But when Manitou's severely weakened, Namisa takes this opportunity to join with him so that it kills Manitou off for good, because demons and humanity may not ever be able to coexist with one another. Splitting herself apart from Hitomi, Namisa plants herself inside Manitou as it begins to disappear along with the spores, with time passing later and the Spookies deciding to disband so that they can choose their own path in life that I won't go through in great detail because my god, the synopsis has already gone on for way too long. Yeesh, I know the only SMT games I played so far were 3, 5, and Tokyo Mirage sessions if you even count that, but this was the sort of thing I was hoping to see more of in those games regarding story and characters, which is pretty impressive for a 1997 Saturn game. We actually spend a fair bit of time with the Spookies and get a decent amount of plot involved, even if once again part of the themes involve humanity falling to their darker selves, which is kind of the case in a lot of Megaten games to be fair. While I wouldn't say the characters are my absolute favorites, they're some of the better ones I've encountered in these titles as of yet. Aside from a couple of the main cast, we get to spend a little time learning about their backstories and relationships with others, with the show stealer definitely being Namisa, your demon companion who's with you throughout the entire game. Though I'll admit I didn't quite understand the praises that were being sung about her by fans. She's a loudmouth and adrenaline junkie, insults others, and is uncooperative at sharing your friend Hitomi's body, who she basically stole it from. Namisa has a weird thing too where she refers to herself in the third person, but it's a little inconsistent and I don't know if that was done on purpose, because sometimes she'll switch to the first person in another scene without any reason, occasionally having both in the same sentence. I mean, having her talk this way doesn't really add anything to the story or her character regardless. In fact, I kinda thought it was a fairly pointless shtick to have, but keep it going all the way if you are gonna give her a trait like that. That is a pretty huge nitpick, I'm aware, but I don't know, I just feel like I've seen Nemesis type of character in plenty of other RPGs, more so in this day and age than back when Soul Hackers first came out. It's the amnesiac and hot-blooded teen trope spliced together, only it's with a demon instead of a human. I also kinda wanted to see more of Hitomi and how she's dealing with another being in her body, maybe have the two of them enter Hitomi's psyche and see what she's feeling, but that's just something I would have added personally. Nemesis is still a fine enough character and she's probably the best one in the game, but I didn't see her as some goddess walking among men like others did. Awesome character design though, but I could be biased on that because I have a thing for goth girls. I wish I could say the same about the protagonist, but he's somehow even more dull in character than the Demi-Fiend. Probably because we can't even see him, since this is a first-person dungeon crawler. He doesn't speak, and the dialogue options we do have are limited. He's not anyone special that demons or characters should be naturally drawn to. He doesn't even have a very unique design to him. At least the Demi-Fiend had that. I can definitely pick him out of a crowd, but this guy could have been replaced by anybody and it wouldn't have made all the difference if you ask me. He's just someone who was lucky enough to have access to a gun-type PC, or comp as the characters say, and can use it to summon and fuse demons in battle. He's the most you shape the character how you want to type as you can get by basically giving you no character to work with. Really, the most interesting part of Soul Hackers to me is its world and the way it operates, using the internet in order for society to function, but simultaneously getting increasingly risky to use, which is pretty scary how accurately it applies to today's world. Despite this game coming out in the 90s where the internet wasn't quite as prevalent as it is today, it successfully predicted the future, albeit to a degree not quite as drastic, but give it time. I'm sure it's bound to get worse. We've already got real-life hackers stealing money from people's bank accounts and picking up personal details, so who knows what else will happen. The concept may be slightly overdone, and it's got that 90s cheese to it with some very hokey dialogue at points.
Your mother is worried about you.
No, she's only worried about my test scores. She doesn't understand the depth of my suffering.
But I still think Soul Hackers World has some distinct charm to it through its visuals and leaving you questions for how certain things work in the new age, such as needing IDs to even step inside a store or investigating a whole other world that's entirely virtual from the character's perspective. Although this was a bit disappointing with what it offers, honestly. There's a bank that's probably no different to a regular bank website, a casino where the computer friggin' cheats for your winnings, a clothes shop you can't interact with, attractions you check out once and then never again, a useless pet shop, and forums that don't help with anything but are still probably better than Reddit. That aside, it's all really fascinating and I'm willing to learn about the game's world when given the opportunity. Graphically, yeah, it is a bit dated here and there with its blocky environments, limited attack animations, and low-res CG cutscenes, but for an old Sega Saturn game, it doesn't look half bad at all. I'd certainly recognize it at a glance, and I quite like how some of the dungeons are designed like actual buildings you could traverse through in real life while in the city, such as the mall and the factory, whereas if you look at something like Persona 1, you can tell that the dungeons are definitely more video gamey with the twisted pathways and numerous dead ends. It's small touches like that that can make all the difference when it comes to world building in your game.
But in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of a video game to get right is the gameplay. So despite the world and some of the characters being pretty interesting, is Soul Hackers also fun to play? It's alright.
Okay, before fans of this game torch my house and spit on my grave, let me be clear that just because I say the game's alright, that doesn't mean I think it's bad. Yes, that is a pretty obvious observation, isn't it? But you would be surprised how many people on the internet I've seen misinterpret something that's okay and something that's an objectively bad game. Most of them not even knowing what the word objectively means, yet they use it all the friggin' time. Some people lose their shit whenever IGN gives something an 8 out of 10, despite that still being a pretty good score. If these are the kind of people we have to look forward to interacting with in this technologically advanced world, we are screwed as a species. The protagonist and Nemissa are the only two permanent members to your party, and in true SMT fashion, you can negotiate with demons to join your party with the right dialogue options or tending to their needs. Up to 4 demons can be put into your squad, making for a total of 6 party members to kick ass in combat. Though this is pre-Nocturne, so that means SMT's staple press turn mechanic doesn't exist just yet.
As a result, what you may find is a slightly more bare-bones RPG battling system where exploiting weaknesses only does increase damage and not much else. On top of that, there's a row mechanic similar to other RPGs where the back row has higher defense, but lower attack power except for spells and guns that our two heroes can equip. The only thing that saves the combat becoming too stale is the ability to recruit new demons and trying them out, which you're gonna need to do a lot more in this game than you might be used to in newer titles, because demons don't level up along with you in Soul Hackers. This also means that demons who join you will only have a few skills in their moveset without being able to earn more. Thankfully in this game there's not one but two ways to fuse demons together to make newer and better ones. The first and probably better solution is to go to the world map and access the Gomadin, a cruise ship run by Victor, aka Devil Summoner's version of Igor and Mido, and then have him fuse 2 or 3 demons together with different combinations offering different skill sets. The other way to fuse demons is just by using your comp anywhere, anytime, but you can only smush together 2 demons instead of up to 3. I managed to get through a lot of the game alright just using the comp to create newer demons, since my stock would sometimes get full, but I do wish I took more advantage of Victor and the Gomadin much sooner, since some demons are only acquired by fusing 3 of them at once. It's a pretty cool change using the fusion system on the fly though, and I hope it comes back in other Megaten titles. You can also have demons become different swords later on, but I never needed to use it, nor did I even have the necessary stuff most of the time. And after completing a small quest for Victor requiring getting back a lost doll of his, transferring demons into it then becomes what's called a Zoma. These are alien creature looking things that have some of the skills carried over from fused demons, and while Zomas don't level up, using higher level demons means a higher level for the Zoma. Additionally, they don't require any magnetite to summon, which I'll go more into later. But again, I never needed to use the Zomas once. I tried calling my first one subscribe, but there's a damn character limit, so I didn't even get much fun out of that. Back in the toy chest you go, subscribe. While your demons don't level up at all, the protagonist and Nemissa thankfully still do, and just like other SMT games, you can still choose which stats to increase each time you gain a new level and create whatever build you want for them. Major tip though, don't bother investing that much into the protagonist's magic stat, since he doesn't learn any spells whatsoever and is purely a physical fighter. You can wear some pretty helpful late game armor by raising his magic stat to a certain amount, and it doesn't take too much leveling to get there, but you're way better off increasing the power of his melee attacks, especially when you get access to swords that sweep across the entire screen. Nemissa, I guess you could technically make her pretty good physically as well, but the game strongly encourages you to improve her magic power, because she learns a vast amount of spells as she levels up, which can actually change depending on how you describe Hitomi at the beginning of the game between upbeat, calm, or sexy. Calling her upbeat lets Nemissa use fire abilities, while saying she's calm gives her ice powers, and calling her sexy lets her use electric spells and for some reason is the only skill branch that gives her Megadolia, a pretty powerful almighty spell that can't be blocked. And you also get the Meteorama healing spell and Necroma skill slightly earlier. Necroma you especially want to get because it is so disgustingly useful for endgame bosses. What it basically does is bring back any dead demons and makes them zombies, so using healing magic on them will just kill them again, but as a trade-off they can survive almost any attack that's thrown at them, making them practically invincible. They can still use their own spells and abilities too, so this shouldn't be ignored whatsoever and makes the final battles much less stressful. I didn't even realize until later that complimenting Hitomi even affected Nemissa's skill branch, but I still ended up calling her sexy because I wanted to see her reaction, and that surprisingly worked to my favor.
So the lesson here, kids, is walk up to a girl, preferably your best friend, and just call them sexy right out of nowhere. I'm sure that'll turn out great for you.
So yeah, I would highly recommend going down this route with Nemissa if you can, and luckily while her electric powers didn't help for every situation, they were good enough to get me through most of the game fairly comfortably, though Soul Hackers is surprisingly one of the easier SMT games I played so far. Some parts might throw you off, particularly with how powerful bosses can be in the second half of the game, go to hell Mayone, but the first half actually didn't give me too much trouble. Now part of that could just be my experience with other Megaten titles, because the game doesn't really do a good job explaining itself on its own, but as long as you're not flat out ignoring demon negotiations and leveling up yourself in Nemissa, you can get a pretty sweet posse and mow down bad guys like nobody's business. If you're playing the 3DS version, you can make your journey even easier if you wanted to by switching on different compacts like adjusting the difficulty or autofilling the entire map. Since with this being a first-person dungeon crawler, you only draw out the map upon each step you take. There's already plenty of reasons to get this 3DS port over the Saturn original, but having the map on the bottom screen really does help for me. I personally just left the compacts alone and tried to get the most authentic experience I possibly could. And the same goes for this Namichi system, where activating Street Pass and coming across other Soul Hackers players can unlock new demons for you, or you can buy more with play coins. One, though, who's using their 3DS as much anymore, let alone playing Soul Hackers on top of that? And two, the amount of play coins you need to purchase demons is rather high, and I could probably fuse it normally in due time anyway, so what's even the point? This is also taken into account that one of the shops you can enter later in the game offers different chips that you can install to your comp, affecting the game in multiple ways, like making negotiations with female demons easier, restoring HP as you walk through a dungeon, or eliminating low-level enemy encounters at the cost of 2 of your 5 chip slots. The one you should never ever remove, however, is the ability to save whenever and wherever you want. I may have said that Soul Hackers isn't the most challenging game in the Mega 10 franchise, but that doesn't mean you won't encounter a few cheat deaths on occasion, especially at the mall with assholes that spam instant death spells. The chip system, in my opinion, is a pretty ingenious idea of altering the game to your favor without becoming too powerful and heavily limiting you, though I think only having 5 slots is perhaps too small a number if you ask me. Granted, you don't really need to have all the chips accessible at once, because like half of them are additions to the UI, such as an experience bar or a clock, but there are some that are just too useful not to have, and generally I don't believe Soul Hackers takes full advantage of the chip system anyway. There aren't that many of them that greatly affect battles, and I was kinda hoping for something similar to what Nier Automata would eventually do with its chip system, by not only giving you more of the UI to see, but also increasing stuff like attack power, defense, or regenerating your health. If ATLUS were to bring this concept back in some form or fashion, I definitely would like this to be more expanded upon. The seeds are there, it just needs water and sunshine to truly flourish, but again, doesn't necessarily make the game any easier or more difficult with what we have. Really, the biggest hurdle, at least pretty early on, is choosing what demons to put in your party and the amount of magnetite you have. What I mean by choosing the right demons is the 2 major factors that the Devil Summoner games introduce, as far as I know at least. I'm sure somebody will point it out to me otherwise. That being demon alignments and a loyalty meter for them. To start with the alignments, this can determine whether or not the demon will want to be in the same party as another demon. So say for example I summoned a demon of the Law alignment, but have another demon in my list who's of the Chaos alignment. Those 2 demons will straight up refuse to cooperate with each other, so you have to remove either one of them to have the other available to summon. This blows already, since I could have some pretty awesome demons at my disposal but won't agree to help. However, the loyalty meter is even more of a pain in the ass to me. Demons behave in different ways based on their personalities. Some like to be ordered around, while others would rather do what they want, to the point of not even doing the commands you tell them to do and instead act completely stupid at times and use another skill that doesn't help in any way, or just dick around and do nothing. The Go command is the best way to circumvent this because it allows each demon to use whatever they desire and increases their loyalty meter, but giving them gifts they might like can also help a little bit, though not much from my experience. So yeah, the most ideal way to make your demons happy is just to let the game play itself. That's not a good sign. Even when the loyalty meter gets fairly high, there's still a chance that the demons just won't listen to you, which gets incredibly annoying when I'm up against a strong boss and need to use a certain skill to win. But it gets even worse if the loyalty meter gets too low and that demon just packs his bags and leaves you. What kind of shit is that? This is also taking into consideration that summoning demons or even having them active in your party while exploring dungeons drains magnetite. This is a form of currency that acts as both payment and their life force. Summoning demons takes a fairly hefty amount of magnetite already, but having more of them in your party drains more magnetite while traveling, and if you run out, the demons will start taking damage as you walk unless you return them to your comp. Magnetite gets pretty hard to come by when you start the game, so you may want to consider having just the protagonist and Nemissa in your party, which doesn't deplete any magnetite whatsoever, allowing you to explore at your leisure and earn more magnetite through battles. It is definitely possible to do, and I've even cleared a couple of dungeons with just these 2 characters, only bringing out the demons for boss fights, but I don't think the magnetite mechanic needs to be as punishing as it is to use. Hell, I'd be fine if it wasn't there at all. It's easier to obtain in the second half of the game, where getting it down to 0 shouldn't be too much of a problem, and you can even trade some in outside of dungeons for a hell of a lot of dough, while buying more magnetite costs a fair amount. But this whole idea wasn't necessary to the gameplay in my opinion, it just makes dungeons more irritating than they ought to be. Speaking of which, much like the gameplay as a whole, the dungeons are simply alright to me. I praised the structure of them earlier, but actually traversing through them is nothing special. There's the occasional puzzle and teleporter to change things up a little, but that usually results in some backtracking, and some of these dungeons can take forever. With the Amami monolith being the most tedious because there's 2 towers with specific buttons to press on each floor, where some buttons are there to throw you off. Soul Hackers is unfortunately another one of those games where I had to put podcasts on to break out the monotony, because without them, I would have been on autopilot throughout a majority of it. But that's not to say I hated my time with Soul Hackers, it's really weird. Battles and dungeons are way more simplistic than newer Megaten titles, but I still feel triumphant by defeating a boss or acquiring more powerful skills. I even tried out some of the post-game content in the form of the Sea Arc dungeon and the extra dungeon you unlock by finishing the story, so it's gotta be doing something right. The Sea Arc in the base game is normally a place you can easily recruit demons you've already met without having to pass through parts of a dungeon again, but the top floor isn't available until the main campaign's already done. There's a few small bits of dungeon crawling involved, but it's mostly a boss rush against very strong demons you haven't fought yet. There's 5 of them in total, and the difficulty for each one is a bit askew. The first one you fight is King Frost, who's not that hard to beat, but he's a little too fond of pressing the "fuck you, I win" button whenever he's near death. You're apparently supposed to know to use the Tetrakarn skill or buy an attack mirror from the casino that throws back physical attacks. Once you do get one, the fight's pretty straightforward afterwards, but that was a pretty annoying roadblock. Mara, unfortunately, isn't much better. In fact, he's probably worse because he never stops boosting his attack power and does so much damage to individual party members that they die in one hit. I forgot to also mention that this is another Megaten title where it mysteriously ends if the protagonist falls in battle. Nemissa? Oh, you can bury her to the ground. But apparently this hunk of wood is so charismatic that everybody else will throw their hands in the air if he even faints. I know he's the only one that has access to the comp and therefore all of the demons, but come on, give him a revival beat or something. Lilim, on the other hand, is not really too hard of a fight if you have someone with Charm G to get rid of the charm status she can inflict on party members. The 4th battle against Lucifuge is an absolute cakewalk, and Beelzebub was mostly an endurance test with triple the amount of health on him than the final boss. Somehow this dungeon started off fairly tricky and ended up getting a little easier as it went. The reward you get at the end though is strange, because killing all 5 of the bosses gives you access to New Game Plus. I've never heard of a game that made you work so hard for it. I was surprised I actually managed to do it at all in roughly 6 hours, and this was a fantastic way to jump ahead several levels. At the end of the story, I was at level 57, but got to level 77 by the time I completed the Sea Arc dungeon, and that made me slightly more prepared for the extra game afterwards, though honestly I didn't make it to the end of this one as of right now. This is a much shorter dungeon than the Sea Arc, though the idea is roughly the same. Small trudges through rooms, each containing their own gimmicks, with each one having another fight at the end. It's where you can fight the antagonists of the original Devil Summoner as well, and I got as far as the last few bosses that are thrown at you one at a time, getting my ass handed to me on a silver platter by Devil Summoner 1's main character and his demons. It looks like some grinding and better demons are still needed to stand a chance against them, which I don't really feel like doing at the moment. It's a shame too, because I would have been very interested to see how the Rhino fight goes afterwards, and the one more battle against this giant mech. Right now, I've got other things to do, unfortunately.
And that's all I have to say about Soul Hackers. I feel like this is sort of an acquired taste that I may just not have compared to some people. As I said, the world, story, and characters are pretty interesting in their own right, but with most of the experience being gameplay, as is tradition when it comes to SMT, at best it's a perfectly serviceable RPG with a few cool mechanics that just don't quite have the time to shine.
I can see why a lot of people do like this game, and I still think Soul Hackers has some appeal, but I'd be lying if I said this was one of the best SMT games out there. I definitely wouldn't recommend it as your first one, with the gameplay being fairly outdated by modern standards, but at least it's one of the cheaper 3DS entries available, especially digitally, while you can still do that. Physical copies are certainly more expensive, but as of this day, they don't reach hundreds of dollars like a lot of other titles in the SMT series do. With Soul Hackers 2 now released to the public and the hype that surrounded it, now's probably a good time to check out the original and see what you've been missing for 25 years. It's the main reason I decided to talk about it as my next SMT video anyway, so pick up a copy if you're interested, but don't feel too guilty if you decide to skip it.
And luckily for me, thanks to ATLUS finally acknowledging my channel, I've received an early review copy of Soul Hackers 2 and played it right to the end already, so we'll take a look at that next time before we head into Fire Emblem Warriors, and I hope you all enjoy the second Soul Hackers game as well. Until then, thanks everyone for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves. An acquired taste that I may just not have compared to others. Damn. As is tradition when it comes to SMT, damn it. With a few cool mechanics that just pretty interesting in their own right. As is tradition when it comes to SMT,